lying, misleading, being deceitful, not telling the truth, stringing fans along. All of those words apply to the Indiana Fever and how they handled this Caitlin Clark situation this year.
When WNBA injury experts stepped in to review the Indiana Fever's handling of Caitlin Clark's recovery, they didn't just find inconsistencies, they uncovered a full-blown cover-up. Coach Stephanie White's public statements painted a picture of slow, careful progress, but the medical timeline told a very different story.
Chloe Peterson, somebody who denied the ankle injury, now is playing into the ankle injury, said she's not being held out because of the ankle, now she is being held out because of the ankle. Who knows who's telling the truth these days when it comes to the Indiana Fever and their media stooges? Who knows?
Experts now confirm that Clark's rehab schedule never matched what the Fever claimed, suggesting deliberate deception to control the media narrative. Fans who trusted every update are furious, realizing they may have been misled for months, because when the experts spoke, one truth became clear. Stephanie White wasn't honest.
If she hasn't started 5-on-5 yet, well then the announcement of her not returning for the final few games of the season seemed like, I don't know, 2 months too late, perhaps? Remember, this was a day-to-day. This was a questionable. This was a, 1 week. Oh, she's returning this day. Oh, no. Oh, now she's returning this day. And she hasn't even done 5-on-5 yet, according to Stephanie White and Chloe P. Whatever. So the thought process that you, me, many of us have shared, that the Indiana Fever knew she wasn't going to be returning and still decided to string fans along to milk them for all they got, seems more and more plausible day by day as the days turn on.
From the very beginning, the Indiana Fever's updates on Caitlin Clark's recovery were a masterclass in confusion. 1 week she was day-to-day, the next she was questionable, and before fans could catch their breath, she was suddenly ruled out indefinitely. Coach Stephanie White stood before reporters with a calm face, insisting everything was going according to plan, that Clark was progressing well and would return when ready. But behind those reassuring words, the details simply didn't line up.
We're not jumping into anything that's too much, White said. We have the ability right now to take it on a week-by-week basis, doing some 3-on-3, doing some 2-on-2, building into 5-on-5. Her being able to play in game-like situations is going to be important. It's been a long time building back into that, but it's October, and she needs to be able to slowly build back. So from an endurance standpoint, she's laying a really good foundation, shows she's not having any setbacks or regression.
Injury experts reviewing the timeline noticed glaring inconsistencies almost immediately. According to physical therapy specialists familiar with groin and quad injuries, the recovery process Clark was allegedly undergoing made little medical sense. White claimed Caitlin was building up through light drills, yet experts confirmed that her lack of full 5-on-5 activity meant she was still weeks, possibly months, away from being game-ready. The idea that she was close to returning, as the Fever implied, was completely unrealistic.
They knew they weren't going to clear her, regardless. Whether she was good to go, not good to go, I'm not getting into the conspiracy theories. I'm over with that. But there's no conspiracy theory here. The Indiana Fever were not going to clear her regardless. That is a fact.
Meanwhile, Fever insiders continued feeding optimistic updates to the press, giving fans the illusion that her return was right around the corner. Tickets sold, merch flew off the shelves, and every vague promise from the team kept hope alive. But the truth was simple. Caitlin's injury had never fully healed, and the team knew it. They pushed the narrative not because she was ready, but because they needed the hype to stay alive. By the time medical analysts spoke out, the damage was done.
So she's still not fully recovered. I doubt she's ever recovered from the quad injury. Now she hasn't recovered from the groin injury. Beautiful. but we're gonna bring her back prematurely. Holly Rowe, even on the sideline, says they didn't have practice time during this entire period. She was brought back too soon without practice. Holly Rowe said that's what Stephanie White told her.
Fans felt played, realizing that what they thought were updates were really marketing talking points. It wasn't just bad communication, it was manipulation. Every press conference, every sideline comment, every "she's feeling better" statement now reads like part of a carefully staged performance. And this was only the beginning. Because the deeper experts dug into the recovery data and timelines, the more it became clear. Stephanie White's story didn't just bend the truth, it broke it completely.
Then when the season's already over, now we get the, I won't be returning for the rest of the season announcement from Caitlin Clark. Because the team's already, the team, the Fever, the staff, whoever, there's already so much shame going on with how they handle this. They don't want to come out and say it. They'll just let it. Caitlin, can you take the bullet for us, please? You think you can do that for us? Just put out a statement, please.
When medical analysts began examining Stephanie White's public comments, one statement stood out like a red flag. In late October, White claimed Caitlin Clark was progressing well through 2-on-2 and 3-on-3 drills and would soon advance to Define 5. To most fans, that sounded like normal recovery talk. But to WNBA injury experts, it was an alarm bell. Those drills aren't the middle of rehab, they're the early stages. At that point, Clark was nowhere near game shape. Her body was still rebuilding strength, balance, and movement control. Sports medicine specialists, familiar with elite athletes, immediately called the timeline unrealistic. The gap between light contact and full competition is massive, especially for groin and quad injuries. It takes weeks, sometimes months, to safely bridge that step. Yet the Fever's messaging made it sound like Clark was just a few practices away from returning to the court. One expert bluntly stated that if Clark hadn't reached full 5-on-5 drills by late October, there was zero chance she was ready back in August or September. The months when the Fever kept teasing her potential comeback, fans started connecting the dots. How could the team talk about her upcoming return when she hadn't even begun the final stage of rehab? The evidence pointed to one conclusion. The organization had been using misleading optimism to keep supporters buying tickets and merchandise. Every vague timeline and hopeful soundbite served a purpose: to stretch the truth long. Enough to finish the season without admitting failure. The more the experts explained, the worse it looked for Stephanie White. Her carefully crafted image as a steady, transparent leader began to crumble. What was once dismissed as fan paranoia suddenly became medical fact. The experts weren't speculating, they were proving the timeline was impossible, and that forced everyone to ask the question no one wanted to voice. If White wasn't honest about Clark's recovery, what else was she hiding from the public? As the truth about Caitlin Clark's injury timeline unraveled, one moment stood out as the turning point: her premature return. In July, the Fever rushed her back onto the court for a high-profile matchup against the Golden State Valkyrie. To fans, it was a comeback story. To experts, it was a disaster waiting to happen. According to sports rehabilitation specialists, Clark's body language and movement patterns that night showed clear signs of under-recovery. Her stride was guarded, her acceleration limited, and her balance inconsistent. Yet, the coaching staff called it progress. Behind the scenes, medical professionals questioned how she was cleared to play so soon. Holly Rowe's sideline report during the game revealed that Clark hadn't practiced with the team in days leading up to her return. That single sentence exposed everything. How could an athlete who hadn't practiced full speed be medically cleared for live competition? The answer, experts said, was simple: she wasn't ready. The decision wasn't about health, it was about headlines. The Fever's motivation was clear. Caitlin Clark wasn't just their best player, she was the franchise's marketing engine. Ticket sales surged when her name appeared on the roster. Networks promoted every game featuring her return. Even opposing teams saw spikes in attendance when she was expected to play. It wasn't basketball anymore, it was business. Injury experts later confirmed that returning an athlete before completing 5-on-5 simulations and strength tests increases the risk of re-injury by nearly 40%. And that's exactly what happened. Within weeks, Clark's groin flared up again, sending her back to the bench. Fans were told it was minor, but analysts knew the damage had been compounded by pushing her return too soon. The Fever gambled with the future of their star and lost. What was supposed to be a comeback became proof that the organization prioritized profits over protection. And the worst part, the same people responsible kept acting like nothing was wrong. It was supposed to be just another night, a regular matchup against the Seattle Storm. The Indiana Fever were leading late in the game, the crowd buzzing and victory within reach. But then came the decision that changed everything. With less than a minute left and the outcome all but secured, Coach Stephanie White sent Caitlin Clark back into the game. Seconds later, Clark went down, clutching her leg in pain. Silence swept through the arena. The same groin that had haunted her all season had given out again. Experts who reviewed the footage were stunned. They described the decision as reckless and medically indefensible. Clark had been logging heavy minutes, showing visible signs of fatigue, yet was still reinserted when rest was the obvious choice. Sports physicians agreed that the move likely aggravated her injury, setting her recovery back by months. Even more alarming, several analysts pointed out that Clark's mechanics before the fall showed microcompensations, small but clear signs that her body was still overprotecting her injured side. She shouldn't have been on the court at all. What followed was a familiar pattern of deflection. Stephanie White downplayed the severity of the incident, calling it a minor setback and praising Clark's resilience. But injury specialists immediately questioned the phrasing. They knew that for an elite athlete, even a mild groin injury can completely derail conditioning and muscle coordination. One sports therapist went as far as to say that the decision to reinsert her ignored basic load management principles taught in every professional training program. Fans watching that night didn't know it yet, but that game effectively ended Caitlin Clark's season. It wasn't bad luck, it was bad judgment. The Fever had gambled again, and the price was their star's long-term health. What happened next only deepened the sense of betrayal, because even after that terrifying scene, the team still refused to tell the truth about how severe her condition really was. After the Seattle incident, it should have been time for honesty. Fans expected transparency, injury updates, and a clear recovery plan for Caitlin Clark. Instead, the Indiana Fever doubled down on confusion. Coach Stephanie White told the media that Clark was progressing as expected, while team sources hinted that she'd be reevaluated soon, but no timeline, no details, and no acknowledgement of how severe her condition truly was. It was the beginning of what injury experts now call one of the most misleading recovery narratives in recent WNBA history. Behind closed doors, the situation was far from stable. Sports therapists close to the league revealed that Clark's rehab was constantly being adjusted, not based on medical benchmarks, but on publicity schedules. When national broadcasts or key matchups loomed, reports about her potential return suddenly appeared in the press. Then, just as quickly, they vanished once the hype died down. To injury experts, this pattern wasn't accidental. It was strategy. The team wanted to keep fans engaged, sponsors satisfied, and the spotlight on the franchise, even if it meant stretching the truth. Meanwhile, conflicting stories began to surface. Some reporters cited a groin issue, others mentioned a quad setback, while one outlet even floated an ankle injury. None of it aligned, and none of it came with official confirmation. Every version sounded carefully crafted to sound optimistic, but vague enough to buy time, but never deliver clarity. As weeks passed, experts grew frustrated. They noted that recovery updates were inconsistent with real rehabilitation stages. If Clark were truly day-to-day, she would have been practicing full-speed drills. If she was still in limited motion, she shouldn't have been labeled close to return. It was all smoke and mirrors. By late summer, it was obvious something bigger was being hidden. What started as silence became deception. And by trying to control the story, Stephanie White and the Fever turned a simple injury into a credibility crisis that would soon explode far beyond the locker room. By mid-August, the entire Caitlin Clark situation had spiraled into chaos. Out of nowhere, reporters began referencing a new injury, her ankle. Just weeks earlier, the discussion had centered on her groin and quad issues. But now, suddenly, the narrative shifted again. Chloe Peterson from the Indianapolis Star claimed Clark had been battling an ankle sprain for weeks. Yet other insiders, including Scott Agnes's, insisted the ankle wasn't the real problem, it was still the groin. Fans were left asking the same question injury experts were: which story was true? Medical professionals immediately called out the contradictions. Ankle injuries have distinct recovery protocols that differ completely from groin or quad rehabs. The idea that Clark could be rehabbing multiple injuries simultaneously, without public acknowledgement or medical explanation, didn't make sense. Experts said if the ankle truly was the main issue, it would have required visible bracing or limited mobility, neither of which was ever seen. It looked like another distraction tactic, designed to shift attention away from earlier mismanagement. The media spin only made things worse. Every week, new reports appeared claiming Clark was close to returning or responding well to treatment. But none of those updates included real benchmarks like conditioning progress, medical clearance, or practice footage. Experts began to suspect that the team was feeding selective information to their preferred media outlets to maintain control of the narrative. It wasn't transparency, it was choreography. Meanwhile, Caitlin herself remained silent. Fans began noticing how often her social media avoided any mention of her health. Some speculated she was being advised to stay quiet, letting the team handle the messaging. The silence became deafening, and the contradictions piled up. By the time experts analyzed the conflicting reports, the conclusion was unanimous. The ankle injury storyline didn't hold up. It was another smokescreen in a long chain of misdirection, proving the Fever's priority wasn't clarity, it was damage control, and the cracks in their credibility were finally starting to show. When independent injury specialists finally pieced together Caitlin Clark's full recovery timeline, the results were undeniable. The Indiana Fever had been misleading everyone for months. Certified athletic trainers and medical consultants who reviewed the data noticed the same alarming trend. The time's public statements and observable recovery markers didn't align at all. The Fever's official narrative simply wasn't possible. Experts confirmed that. Clark's type of quad and groin injuries require a structured progression from mobility work to limited contact, then 5-on-5 scrimmages before any game clearance. Yet, according to public records, she never reached those advanced stages during the periods when the team hinted at her return. One doctor specializing in professional sports rehabilitation put it bluntly: either the reports were false, or she was cleared against protocol. Both options reflected badly on the organization. The analysis also revealed a pattern of timing manipulation. Every positive update about Clark's health coincided with ticket pushes, home games, or major media coverage. Experts pointed out that medical updates rarely follow publicity cycles, unless they're being staged. In other words, her injury recovery wasn't driving the headlines. Marketing strategy was, as more professionals spoke out, the team's explanations began to collapse under scrutiny. Each injury setback was paired with vague phrases like working her way back or building endurance, but never actual medical detail. That vagueness wasn't accidental. It was intentional ambiguity, designed to buy time and calm backlash. Even worse, sources close to the league reported that several medical advisors raised red flags internally, warning that pushing Clark too fast could lead to long-term damage. Their concerns, according to insiders, were brushed aside in favor of keeping the momentum alive. By this point, there was no denying it. Stephanie White's updates weren't innocent oversights or media slips. They were calculated statements made to protect the Fever's image. And as the experts confirmed, the pattern wasn't just miscommunication, it was manipulation on a professional scale. By late October, the truth could no longer be hidden. During an interview meant to highlight Caitlin Clark's recovery progress, Stephanie White finally revealed that Clark was still only participating in limited 2-on-2 and 3-on-3 drills. That one line sent shockwaves across the WNBA world. For months, the Fever had implied that Clark was on the verge of returning, yet she hadn't even reached full 5-on-5 activity, the final stage before clearance. To injury experts, this wasn't just a small detail. It was proof that the team had been lying all along. Sports medicine specialists immediately broke it down for fans. If Clark was still in partial contact drills, her muscles, ligaments, and endurance were far from game ready. She wasn't just taking her time, she was still recovering from deep tissue damage that needed months of careful progression. That revelation completely dismantled the timeline the Fever had pushed since midsummer. It exposed every optimistic report, every almost-ready update, and every false promise for what they truly were: manufactured optimism. The reaction was instant. Analysts called it a betrayal of trust, not only toward Clark, but toward every fan who bought tickets believing she'd return. Some argued that the organization used her name to prop up attendance, while others accused the coaching staff of hiding the truth to save face. Social media erupted with side-by-side comparisons of White's statements from July to October, showing how the narrative shifted every few weeks. To maintain fan engagement, medical experts had the final word. They confirmed that, based on the October information, there was no realistic way Clark could have been medically cleared earlier in the year. Every earlier update was exposed as deception. And when fans looked back, they realized that Caitlin Clark's recovery story wasn't a comeback. It was a carefully controlled illusion. Stephanie White's credibility was shattered, and the Fever's reputation took a hit that no PR spin could undo. The truth was finally out, and the damage was permanent. When the experts finally spoke, the story of Caitlin Clark's recovery was no longer a mystery. It was a scandal. Every optimistic update, every vague interview, every false promise had been part of a calculated cover-up. Stephanie White's credibility collapsed under the weight of the facts, and the Indiana Fever's trust with fans was broken beyond repair. What was meant to be a season of resilience turned into a season of deception. In the end, Clark's injury didn't just expose bad luck, it exposed bad leadership. And this time, no amount of spin could hide the truth.